Well, greetings everybody, and welcome to this this week's Inworld review. Oh dear, you can tell it's telling, can't you? Right, it is of course you don't know this, but we do. It's the 24th of September. Of the year 2017. It'll be October, and it'll be all Halloweeny and stuff like that by next week, won't it? This program is an open-ended talk show where we look at matters pertaining to the hypergrid, open simulator, and other virtual worlds from time to time. Basically, immersive spaces that are user-created that allow for collaboration and are fully, where possible, at least open source. I'm joined, as always, by James Atloud, who's also, as always, multitasking on operating our cameras. So welcome, James.
Oh, thank you, Mel. I really enjoy doing this, and I'm glad to be back.
And our special guest this week is Albertlr Lander. I'm just going to call him Albert, who is, he's from OS Grid. He'll introduce himself in due course. OS Grid being, of course, often referred to as the developers grid, in that it is very closely connected with the OpenSim developers and tends to be the first place where everything gets tried out, for better or worse, I imagine, Lander. But so welcome, Albert.
Thank you for inviting me today.
Our pleasure, and it has actually been some time. Before we get into the conversation, I think this week, I'm just going to ask James to switch the cameras, if we have it set up, to what is actually the screen on the left. I think we did that, didn't we, James?
Yep.
And I just going to run through a bit of housekeeping, as it were, from that screen. Hypergrid Safari, you all know it, you all love it, and it will be happening at noon on Wednesday as normal. The meeting place currently is HG Safari Region on Franco Grid, but there are a number of other clubhouses that are used to meet if Franco Grid's down or whatever. I have no idea where we're going to be going this week, but you'll be able to find out from my posts and stuff by Wednesday morning. Right, fresh off the design desk, so to speak, we've got a little promo slide for the Open Simulator Community Conference. It's slated for 9th and 10th of December this year. Call for proposals as far as talks, presentations, panels, and everything else like that has already gone out. And there's also a call out for volunteers for everything from filmmaking to greeters, scripters, you name it. There's a call has gone out anyway, so we can look forward to that. This is the last you'll see of this advert, really. It's for the Steam Expo, which is happening on TangleGrid. TangleGrid.net 8002:Expo Isle, if you want a hypergrid over there. This is actually, as you can probably see from that sign, the very last day. So when this show is over, hopefully you won't be too impatient to get over there before. When this show is over, you can go over there and see what's on there. I was actually over there for a last look during the week, and there's some quite wonderful stuff there too. It's I think there might be 4 regions, I forget offhand, but quite a lot to look at. Okay, Abbott Art Fest, the big Abbott Art Fest event. We had the organisers on a few weeks ago talking about this. That's actually opened yesterday. There's been big parties. They are continuing today. And the actual Avatar Fest grounds and exhibits, so to speak, will be open to October the 30th. But again, if you're around later today, it tends to be the US evenings. When it picks up, there are performers and various things happening there, as well as the exhibits itself. But that will continue over the next weeks. This is a picture of me, incidentally, in my mesh avatar, which He'd also go when he's got shades on and when he's got a hat on, but he's a bit glitchy, so I haven't changed to him here yet. That's our actual at the Avatar Fest. I'm just standing in front of our Hypergrid Safari stand. A little plug for Inworld Review, as you can see behind it, and various freebies, hypergates and stuff you can pick up there if you want them. The next slide. Right. It got rather busy yesterday. A lot of avatars, as you can see, hung out at the bar here. Sitting meant the lag was reduced, but in the background you can see the main stage, which was where everybody else was sort of dancing and partying to everything from music to poetry. It's not easy to dance to poetry, but lots of avatars gave it a go. They really did. Okay, now this is breaking news. I mentioned it on the news earlier. Tessa, Ember, and I have been working on what is hopefully going to be a Hypergrid International Expo, is the name we've decided on, which will principally, as far as presentations, events are concerned, be the weekend after OSCC. Though it will sort of start probably at the end of OSCC, because we'll sort of slip from some panels there into the other one. The difference with this one is that most of the presentations will be about best practices on the hypergrid, but also a lot of them will be in foreign languages because they tend to not be featured in the main convention. And we'll hopefully be doing our best to find ways of translating some of the foreign language events that are certain to be happening there. More news on that as time progresses, but sort of shortly after OSCC. Yep, that's just Hypergrid display, which is still up at the OSCC grounds. And that's a promotion for this show, believe it or not. But since you're watching, you don't need that. And yep, I think I've reached the end of my, what's this? Yes, there I am. So we can now return to the seats and get on with the talking heads bit. Right. So, as I said, we really just have one guest, Albert, today, but there is actually quite a lot to talk about. And what I'd love to do, Albert, really to start off with is, I know you're going to talk about a fundraising thing and stuff like that, but maybe to start, it's at least a year since you were last on the show. I know there have been a lot of changes behind the scenes at OS Grid and on the grid itself. So, you know, maybe just a quick update on the grid itself and what's going on.
Yeah, sure. First, let me give you a little background. I'm going to be talking today also about a fundraising event we're starting next week. And it was my idea to sort of pattern this after the way that it's done in public radio. And the reason I mention public radio is I was a general manager of Georgia Public Radio for 5 years. And before that, 3 years as administrative director of the organization. I've been in nonprofits, community theater also. So all that's my background. Plus, I'm a composer and I have a degree in music. So I've always been involved with the arts. And I was just a user of OpenSim on Second Life, like a lot of people. And I think my very first time on OS Grid, I think it took me about 45 minutes just to get across their warehouse to get a pair of pants.
Yeah.
It was that bad, the lag. Now, I couldn't necessarily blame it on them. It was probably my slow computer at the time. Today, I have like 4 gigahertz, so I'm no problem, almost anywhere. But when I joined OS Grid, I was merely a user for many, many years. And then all of a sudden, several years ago, I saw that that they were having problems with the organization. And in getting into the history of it, I finally unraveled a lot of what went on. And first off, they needed somebody that knew something about nonprofits. Because for one thing, they had all of their grids and this grid and the various sims running on servers in California at the University of California. And up to that point, a lot of those were being donated. And at some point, the university said, no more.
Was this, is this the same Is this the same university Krista's at?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, well, they still host the OCC.
Right, and she really had no control over that, but it's what the university said. So something had to be done, and behind the scenes, we really didn't know this, but Hero, who was our president shortly after that, silently moved everything over to servers in Texas, and basically kept it going without anybody knowing what was going on. And then he called a meeting and said, we've discovered that we really don't have board members. We need to get more board members. So, and he said, we need somebody that knows about a nonprofit and everything. And I looked around, nobody else said anything. I said, well, I think I can help you. Up to this point, I had already incorporated another nonprofit, in fact, a radio reading service with the IRS. So I went through the procedure and I knew that. And I'd been filing taxes and filing grants and everything all year long, my whole life, for either community theater or for public radio in that case. So I volunteered, and we decided, and after some discussion with Hero, we decided to incorporate the organization in Texas because I could not find proper information in California. I even tried contacting the IRS to see, well, have they ever applied for a nonprofit status? And the IRS tells me, no, we couldn't. So we started over. And we basically started a new organization in Texas to take over the operation of OS Grid and to keep it going. Now, when OS Grid was first set up, it was set up by, believe it or not, and I mentioned this to you earlier.
This is a great story. Yes.
Second Life actually was behind setting up OpenSim. They were very much into setting up a open source software version of that. And they even provided the lawyers to set up the incorporation thing in California. And as I just found out, and I told you this last night, they apparently had applied for a nonprofit status with the Internal Revenue Service. But for the life of me, for 5 or 6 years now, I haven't been able to find a federal ID number on them or anything. And then last night we found out actually their nonprofit status had been revoked. And somebody said, at first said that was us. Then I finally got to the bottom of it. We clarified it. No, it is not the current OS Grid Incorporated. We do business as, in fact, you have to put our name in as OS Space Grid Incorporated, spelled out, in order to do a proper search on the IRS. And it's the way the IRS had put it in there. If you look up OS Grid Incorporated under revoke, yeah, it'll come up as revoked, but it turns out that's the old organization, which again, we had no idea they had applied for that. Now, the difference between the two organizations is the first one was tax exempt, which means they would not pay federal taxes on income. They were not tax deductible. In other words, if somebody donated something, they could not take that off their taxes. But when I applied for the new organization, we went for a 501c3, which is an official nonprofit corporation, and we were granted this status on May 15th, 2015, retroactive to 2013 when we first set it up. And we've also registered in Texas. We filed all the reports. We're all up to date, and we're perfectly fine with the IRS. So anyone donating to us, all the way back to 2013, can take that off their taxes if they pay U.S. taxes. Anyway, that's that situation. We got into a lot of rigmarole with people accusing us of all kinds of stuff at some point, and they just wouldn't believe that I knew what I was doing. But we resolved everything finally. And at one point, we had problems with, Hero coming in as the president. And a few people had personally conflicts with him. And Hero has really kept the organization going for those years. But about, I think it's 2 years now, Dan Banner has now taken over as the president. Dan has been working with OS Grid from the very beginning. He's always the person everyone goes to when there's a problem, and he handles a lot of the technical problems with the grid and getting it rebooted when it needs to. And I have to mention also,
I seem to recall we had Dan on this show at about
Yeah,
the pointed time, about the pointed time where he took over. Yeah.
and Dan lives in Houston, Texas, and you know what happened in Houston, Texas.
Oh, it's been a bit wet there recently. Or windy. Windy. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I'm being
Fortunately,
polite.
in Dan's case, he lived on high ground. But that is actually his real life business. He gets involved in remodeling and building. So he's very, very busy in real life right now.
I bet.
That whole city's going to have to be rebuilt. But at the same time, he's still devoting his time, to OS Grid, making sure things are fixed. And you were talking about changes that we've made. We've got a new board of directors, about 5 members now. Hero has been made to what is referred to as a, what is the term on that? I have to, sometimes my mind.
Honorary person.
Well, yeah, basically that's what it is. He can come to the board and vote, but he's not required to.
Right.
There's a certain term for that, and it slipped my mind, but I'll think of it in an hour and then remember it. But anyway, we have a very good board of directors now, and Dan has looked at a lot of the things and requests from the membership of what we need to do to make everyone's experience there better. And we've worked with some of our volunteers in the organization, for instance, to put up tutorials. We've expanded our wiki. We've now, it's going on 2 years now. We've started up what's called our Saturday Q&A. It's a meeting we hold on Saturdays, 11 a.m. every Saturday, almost every Saturday, in which anyone can come, even if you're not a member, and talk about OpenSim and OS Grid, what problems, what we can do, and so forth. The ones we've been concentrating on most recently is how can we get our funds up, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But another thing that's been going on is we've had a very gifted person who is in programming working on our website, because we've had a pretty good website over the years, but it hasn't kept up with new changes in the software. A lot of things didn't work properly. And so we're gradually implementing these into our members' usage. They can log on to the website itself. For instance, I think it was just the last week or so, they've now had it so that a person can get a partner and they can get divorced. I guess call that deleting or whatever. But it now works. And we didn't actually have that before. And,
that seems to be something that actually is not at all unpopular in virtual worlds, actually, especially in the closed worlds. But yeah, very good.
We were joking for a while there that you could get hitched, but you could never get divorced.
Yes.
But now that's fixed now, so we can't say that anymore. And I think people will see a big improvement over the Oval website probably by the first of the year. From what I'm hearing, a lot of the changes can be made that need to be made. We'll be able to have searches and profiles improved, and a lot of the things people were, asking us to try to fix better. And
do you use the website for kind of region operators control panels and things like that?
Yes,
I mean, I know, for example, we're not there at the moment, but in Canada, for example, you can find your regions and reboot them and bring them up and stuff like that, actually via the web, rather, even if you're not involved.
One of the problems we are running into is OS Grid goes back how long now? 10 years.
Yep.
Over 10 years, because we just celebrated our 10th birthday in August. And
we had a program a few weeks ago where Manny came along, and I thought we were going to be talking about something completely different, but we ended up spending about 90 minutes going through all the milestones in OpenSim's history, and it was a great show, So
and a lot of those occurred on OS Grid. We're not the only grid now, and a lot of improvements and things are being made, on other grids too. And but getting back to the original purpose of OS Grid, it was originally set up again by Second Life and some individuals that wanted to provide a testing ground really for the OpenSim software. That is what has been its primary purpose. And then as we get older and older, we're finding we got more and more people moving here. They actually like it here. They decide, I want to stay here. And so we've actually had a community growing on OS Grid over the years that weren't really addressed as such, I would say, by the old organization. And so when we started the new one, we actually included that it was to serve as a social media platform also. The old one did not do that. This one did. And that's why we have made a major change in that area. Now, trying to balance the development area and the social, it's a little difficult sometimes. And I can't say we're as stable as every other grid because a lot of them are using a level of software that has been really tested and really proved to be stable.
Well, this is a thing with OS Grid, isn't it? It's sort of known to many people as the developer's grid. That's not to say every resident is a developer, but it was one of the first grids that allowed people to, host a grid at home, but actually simultaneously port it into, your continents, as it were. And, it's always had this sort of deep connection with developers, and we'll come to in your time, I think. But for example, there's been a lot of talk recently because a few weeks ago we got the final release of the 09 series of OpenSim, and of course you've been running. You are always running. Because of that development history, you're always running the latest development patch almost.
Right. We've had 9 running on, OS Grid for over a year now.
Yeah.
And there are constant changes and corrections being made to it. We don't actually update the actual, I would say, plazas on OS. I should mention the way we have things set up. There are about 8 regions, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that are actually run by OS Grid themselves. All the rest are volunteer sims, people running their own sims on the servers of OS Grid. And they do that for free. They're not required to pay. You go just about anywhere else and you're going to have to pay something. We do beg for money, though, because it costs money. Right now, I think it's running about $1,500 a month to pay for just those servers. And every once in a while, we get a big bill for something else, for having, the DNS service or something like that. Yeah. And we've been watching our funds, unfortunately, for the last 2 years go down, meaning basically the reserves we have. And we store most of our money in PayPal because it makes it easier to pay the bills from that. And they do all the accounting for us. And so when somebody gives us gives PayPal a credit card, we never see that. So it's perfectly safe. A lot of people say, "Oh, I don't give my PayPal." Believe me, I tried to make some changes on our just our setup for OS Grid itself. Yeah. I don't think a Russian could get into that thing if he wanted to hack that with $1 million. It took me 6 weeks to get some information changed on there through PayPal. They even have like a mysterious email you have to send an email to. You can't talk to them as a human. You can only send an email. So it's like the hoops they put there against making changes to things. I'm perfectly content that my credit card is perfectly safe with them. No one will ever see it.
Yeah.
So anyway, we found that is the easiest way to handle that. But one of the things we have just recently added is a post office box, so that if someone does not want to use a credit card, they can mail us a check. And we have that address on our website. And actually, it's 3 miles down the road from where I am, since I'm the treasurer now, and it's across the street from our bank. So we got everything there located finally. And we're not sure if, people want to send checks or if they want to, send money from, we can take foreign checks from Europe now because the bank says they can handle those. And so we're doing this as an experiment for the year. It costs us I paid for it, about $52 a year for the post office spot. So I figured, well, this is a good investment. We'll see if it gets paid for. And if it doesn't, then we'll just stick with PayPal. But
it's good to have the options. Yeah.
Right. So we're trying, some various things to see how we can do. The other thing is, if you recall, we had that big crash on OS Grid in which the main inventory of everyone got really trashed. And that was because some of the servers that were supposed to back up properly did not work. And they spent maybe 2,500, I think, total, maybe 3,000 on restoring that data. And it took forever to do it, but we had people who were patient, stuck with us, and it was eventually accomplished. And we got most of that inventory and that data back. And that's because the board felt that the data that everyone entrusted to us to store for them was important. Those were original creations, belongings of people, and it was worth the time and effort it took to restore it. But at the same time, we were able to get extra contributions in to cover that. But
I have to say, I'm getting a lot of noise interference in somewhere. It's like banging and knocking on the air. Do we know where?
No, I'm not hearing it. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's very odd. I was getting sort of the sound of a lot of activity over our voices. Never mind. Carry on.
But anyway, the amount of money that finally came in did cover that, and up to that we're maintaining about a $3,000 balance in our PayPal account. But in the last 2 years, we've noticed that the average amount that we carry in that has gone down and down and down. Down to about 2,000, 1,500. So it's really about half of what we really need to keep in that. We've also got our bank account better set up. So we've got about $500 roughly in that. And what we've done is we've set up a goal for this upcoming fundraiser to raise $3,000. And believe it or not, we had already gotten a generous donation to that. We already have $1,000 from a person who wished to remain unknown. And then this past weekend, we got another $50 pledge. And because we've had some people make what are known as matches, that's where a person says, I'll match a pledge dollar for dollar up to a certain amount. We have about $450 in matches that people can make a pledge and their amount will be doubled. Now, all of these are techniques that are used in public radio. And it's what I've had a lot of experience in. So we decided, well, the DJ parties we put on here on OS Grid every week, they become very popular. And we're getting a lot of people from other grids and from our own grids that come to these parties. So we decided we were going to try that and see how it worked. And as that's developed, we finally got the thing worked out, decided to come up with a theme of a carnival. And we're going to have our event grid completely converted with exhibits there. There will be some NPCs, a juggler, someone who does palm reading. And for certain donations, you're able to participate in these things. And we're going to have our DJs reading reasons as to why the users need to support OS Grid. And again, we're not trying to go for this large amount of money, just enough to get our coffers filled up. So we've got some backup funds in case another emergency comes up. And so it's a very modest, I would say, amount. Now, the same time, we're competing with disasters everywhere around us. Houston, Texas, Puerto Rico. We encourage people to continue supporting that, but we're asking for a very little. If everyone actually gave $5 on OS Grid that was using it, we'd have everything we need.
I was going to ask about that because it's it's a free grid. It's survives on donations. Is there any way, for example, if somebody's got a home-hosted grid, and that I'm never quite sure how it works because this grid we're broadcasting on is mine and it's on my desktop, but it's kind of I know people who've got the a grid running on the desktop, but it's also simultaneously, as it were, on OS Grid, and presumably that's kind of a like a DNS lookup thing, isn't it? Where rather than go to log into somebody's grid within your grid kind of thing, they log into your grid and they can easily access the router. But do you make any charges for that lookup service, for example, that allows those volunteer grids or regions to be in your grid?
Well, we do have to pay for it, but
yeah,
we don't charge anyone else for it.
Right. So people can literally do it for free without donating. Yeah, I'm with you. Okay, I was just curious because one would hope those people felt obliged to, at least
well,
pay them.
What I'm saying is, even if you're not a resident of OS Grid serves the purpose of, one, it's testing and helping to develop the software that you're using. And if you help support us, you're helping to support its development.
Sure, yeah.
Two, we also serve as a social media. It's one of the most popular grids in the metaverse. People come to the parties. People come here to get free items. We offer more free things than just about anybody else. It gives a first place for people to first learn how to start out in OpenSim so they can go elsewhere. And so what I'm saying is that's why it's important to keep it going and for it to be here and be strong. Well, I've got like a whole list of things I've prepared for the fundraiser, which I'm not going to read here, but it's for the DJs to give. And we will be having a DJ parties on Friday, the 29th, going through October 1st. And there will be Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And various DJs will be asking people to support the organization. They can do it by PayPal or they can by making a pledge. And to make a pledge, all they have to do is send it to an email, pledge@osgrid.org. That's all there is. And we can bill them later. They just tell us the total amount. And again, when they do that, then we can bring in matching funds and double what they're giving to us.
But that was curious too, because you mentioned that a few minutes ago, this matching business. I mean, that actually sounds great, but who matches who?
Well, it's basically anyone that donates. For instance, we had one individual that had given us $50 this week, so we were able to raise our total $1,100 so far. Now, there's like 450 sitting to the side there that can go into our totals, but we have to get a pledge in first. And if you understand, dollar for dollar, $1 will make $2. $5 will be $10. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, I understand completely.
And then gradually the matching amount goes down, unless someone decides they want to give us another matching grant. That's basically
I'm with you. So the 1-for-1 matching is a donation in itself that's held in for the matching. Okay, yeah, that's the bit I wasn't quite clear on.
And all of the funds can be taken off taxes in the United States. I wish other countries would acknowledge that, but no, they have their own tax system. So I'm afraid it wouldn't work anywhere else.
And you mentioned also something. I don't want to divert us, but I read apparently Linden Labs have issued, I think, to international customers this week about difficulties for taking payments from international cards now. And I think you mentioned, for example, your bank, if somebody wanted to donate using international funds, not by PayPal, but like send you a check.
And I believe they can accept transfers of funds.
Right.
I think we just have to go through the purpose of communicating the proper account numbers to both parties.
Sure.
And the other thing I should mention is the bank we're with right now is BB&T. It's a smaller bank in the United States. They are expanding around. We were with Bank of America, but they were charging us $15 a month just to let our funds sit there.
Oh, God, they're meant to pay interest on your funds. That's what banks are all about, isn't it?
I know. And the fact that we were a nonprofit, well, that didn't mean anything to them. They really could care less.
Oh,
That's
good.
why we went with BB&T, because they give us an account. We'd have to have over 200 transactions before they would charge us anything. And
Sure.
to be honest with you, I don't think we're going to get that many.
Yeah.
So not in the near future. But getting on to another thing, a lot of people have asked us about, well, when I give you money through PayPal, do you get all of that? No, we don't. PayPal does charge a 2.9% handling fee plus 35 cents per transaction. However, as we are now a 501c3, we're going through the process with them to reduce that to 2.2%. So we're doing everything we can to improve our use of the funds.
Yeah.
And this is another thing that someone mentioned. Really, we are a nonprofit. We have no employees. We do not have any executives that get any of the money from the organization. We are one of the few nonprofits, and I say this with great pride, that 100% of everything that is donated goes strictly to OS Grid itself and the servers and the costs we have to pay for the various services we provide. You can't say that about almost any national nonprofit.
Yeah.
They'll have people raising funds to them that take 25% off the top.
Yeah.
They'll have, an executive that's getting $1 million something. Well, we don't. We are all volunteers. So if you're talking about an investment, OS Grid puts your $5 to far further purposes than some of the other groups.
And in the States, the tax deduction thing presumably simply means that when you pay a donation, then that is no longer, you deduct that amount from your taxable income. So
okay, now there are certain limits on that. And it seems one of the rules of the IRS is you can deduct up to 50% of your income.
Right. Which is quite a lot, I imagine, for most people.
In contributions. So if somebody gave us $100,000, they would have to have income of at least $200,000 to take that whole
to be able to take advantage. I'm with you. Yeah.
And if they gave us $100,000, we wouldn't be on here asking for money anymore.
Yeah. Well, good point. Very good point. So, somebody out there got a spare 100,000?
Well, as I said, when we first announced this campaign, we were going for 3,000. We already have 1,100 because someone stepped forward and gave us $1,000 outright. And and we wish that there were more.
I don't know whether I've come across any instance of grid or anything on the hypergrid that's done this yet. But recent years we hear a lot about crowdfunder type things that have an objective and a total they need to reach.
But even those crowdfunding things, they take something off the top. Those websites that handle that.
Right, of course.
That's right, and that's why we prefer to do it ourselves in-house.
Yeah.
Because besides, we're not going for that such a large amount of money. And I think most people could do it. The main thing, I think the problem in raising funds is getting the message over to people. And that's why I'm here today. And that's why we're having our Saturday Q&A meetings. And believe me, we've got volunteers. I would say we probably got at least 20 people working on this campaign for us behind the scenes. And they're creating some marvelous things to see at this carnival. some NPCs that are doing tricks. I mean, it's like going to a real life carnival.
Yeah. I've seen the things NBCs can do these days. It's really
Yeah, I'm
quite
really
incredible.
surprised. They even have a dunking booth.
For the people that won't pay up. Ha ha.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it sounds wonderful. I certainly hope it's going to boost the conference, so to speak. Obviously, we'll round up, and before we go, we'll give out all the verbally, as it were, all the links and stuff for this. But OS Grid itself, as a grid, a venue with things going on and stuff. How's it going these days? Are you seeing an increase in events being held there? Are you getting
yes,
more people bringing regions online? And
oh yes, all I can say is that's one reason we need more funds, because we really want to expand the plazas that we have available for the public, and maybe do some for some really special events. And actually, we've got some are being donated right now, but they really need to be paid for. And we're looking at improving the servers that we're using. And we're also looking at costs, what we're paying for what we're now getting. So we're looking around, and we're going to stretch the dollars as far as they'll go and try to get the best we can get for the dollar.
Mm-hmm.
That's generally the principle behind everything.
Do you have, they're probably not yours, but you may be hosting them. Do you have any of those kind of areas that, like the OSS grid has to have, where you've got 4 simulators joined, to accommodate large events? Like a stage area and 3 audience areas and things.
Yeah.
Do you have any setups in place already for, the possibility of organising larger events? If somebody wants to.
Well, those are available. In fact, when they set up the birthday regions, those were 5 VAR regions. And when you go there, it's not crowded. It was all spread out, and you really had the sense of open space there. You begin to think, well, is there really people here? But you keep walking and walking and walking, and you see one exhibit after another. We had 4 of those VAR regions filled with exhibits. We had a 5th one ready to go, but we decided, let's just stick with the 4 for now.
It's so funny. This region started off as a 4x4, and I thought, oh, what the hell? Get it out of the way. I'll up it to 5x5. And I'm no builder or anything like that, but I've learned a few things over the years, and I use mesh terraforms and things, and I tend to move in my camera to the air and put stuff down, and it is actually remarkable because I'm used to doing that in, say, another grid where it's a single region, and you get so used to that perspective that when you got a VAR region, you tend to do it on the grand scale thing. It's a single region. As soon as you go out of camera mode and down to the end, you realize how vast it is. Oh, that's meant to be a little walkway. Instead it's a huge valley.
Yeah, I have 5 VAR regions myself, so I know.
It's funny. Yeah.
The problem is I made them so big I don't have time to fill them up.
Yeah, same. Well, I just thought make it as big as I'm ever going to want it, and eventually it will fill up.
Well, another thing I did is interesting. One of my regions I set up as basically a water region.
Yeah.
And I set it up as a sandbox. So anyone that wanted to build something could build there. And I was surprised to see one of the avatars named Wizard went in there and built this marvelous build of a huge tower in mesh with solar dishes on top of it. And it's a huge build. Another person put a volcano in that region. And so what I'm saying is, and there's room for all that, and there's no lag.
Yeah.
You go in there and just look at these marvelous builds. And so that's the concept we're trying to promote on OS Grid, is that, we're open for free creative use of OpenSim. And that's what we want to continue doing, and we want to expand it. And when people donate, just $5 if need be, but we welcome large amounts. Some people give more. And the PayPal donate paid is all set up for that purpose. So it makes it very easy to do. They can bill them on a monthly basis or one-time charge. They do that. And some people unsubscribe at some point and move on to another grid. We understand that happens. So we do have a turnover. But at the same time, we see a lot of new people coming in from Second Life for the first time, or for instance, they've never been to Second Life. And that's why we even have a welcome center that has a tutorial that they can walk through. It explains how to use the viewer, how to, basically build things.
That's a very good point, because as OpenSim becomes more popular, in the sense that there's huge amounts of land here already, but actual people, tend to be scattered. But as more and more people use it, they in their real world talk to other people. And, once upon a time, people would say, oh, you should come into this place called Second Life, without saying it's a walled garden or anything like that. They would just say it. But nowadays, there is more opportunity for people to say, well, look at this. This is lots of grids. This is OpenSim, the hypergrid, and you should come in here. So you do get, there seems to be an increased number of, shall we say, virtual world newbies coming into OpenSim who don't know Second Life, whereas it used to be a bit of the, the pioneers move on and the role players stay Second Life or something. But now we are entering, I think, that phase where people are up for discovering OpenSim as its own entity, so to speak.
Well, we've been seeing more and more new people come to it. And in going through our Welcome Center, by the way, I was doing this the other day. I came up with the idea that maybe we should try to make note cards for each of the displays that not only people can take in English, but people can take in various languages. Because we not want to lock ourselves in just to the English, American, and Australian, Canadian populations. We have one of our board members is from France.
Yeah,
and
I've always
very much international.
Yeah, I've always felt when I go to OSGrid, and actually I've got an avatar there too, of course, but it has a pretty international flavor, whereas a lot of grids are, obviously something like Great Canada Grid is, well, actually it's not all Canadians, but, it's focused on that mood of Canada, shall we say. And Franco Grid, the same, very much French or whatever. But, the Expo I mentioned at the beginning that working on with Thursday, it's the idea that, there's a lot of English flavor to OpenSim, but, these servers are all over the world. And I'm sure with your grid, the individual servers that connect to it are probably scattered all over the planet.
Well, another topic is educational use.
Yeah.
We have the University of Hawaii, I understand, is now on OSGrid. And I don't know the details yet. And we've had several other universities and schools that have active participation with their own SIMs on OSGrid. We don't charge them a thing for their presence there. In a lot of cases, if they try to, host their own grids, they get resistance from their schools about, oh, we can't afford this and all that. But OSGrid gives them an alternative so they can start, so they can show what it can do. And then they can show it to people who have funding and then help them get their own grids or school somewhere else, or they can continue using it on OpenSim and OSGrid.
Yeah, I think that's I was actually thinking about that the other day. What's his name? Dieter. Some chap in Germany. In real life, he works with the education system. And as I gather it, they would have done something like put OpenSim into various schools or whatever, and then connect them together with their own kind of little sub-hypergrid. And the idea is you take it not to point of concept, but you take it right to the point of working. And then, when people see that thing working, then, other schools want to join the, school virtual net, and until you get to a point where every school in the country is part of its own virtual world network, basically. And I think that I think things like that will happen when people stop sort of saying, well, I've got this idea for this, I want to get loads of VC capital, and then the VC people will start dictating what we do. If developers just take things through to beyond concept to like a working thing, and then strategically choose a few working for the better word clients, then at that point it can become viral. It's no longer proof of concept, it's proof of actuality. So when you make it easy, as you are saying OS Grid does, for people to literally just do that and be live, and it's no longer proof of concept, it's actually working, and they can then spread the word and say to fellow schools or fellow book clubs or whatever it may be, look how easy this is, how it's working. You must of course take the risk, of course, with OS Grid expanding, that even though there's presumably a limit to the servers you actually host, I'm never quite there. Obviously all the OS Grid regions, the plazas and such like, are hosted by you on servers. But for many of these volunteer regions that are connected to the grid, the actual servers, if I'm right, are on things like people's desktops and stuff. They just deploy to your map, don't they?
Yes, in those cases, and sometimes depending on their, the computer speed or their internet connection, it can affect whether they log a lot. Yeah. But at the same time, they're people who provide, the server software on their own service centers around the world. And those are some of the things we're looking at to expand to, because we're not sure that the ones we're using right now are really the best for our use.
Yeah.
But, decisions are going to be made, but we got to get the funds there to handle the changeover.
That was actually where I was leading, oddly enough, in terms of fundraising. I mean, basically, you need donations to cover the overheads.
Oh, yeah.
Overheads is the word, really.
Even though it looks like we're going to save money in going with maybe newer servers, it still will take a transition period to go from one to another. And so it takes more funds. And we want to, again, expand some of the regions. I want to mention one region, though, Libsa Plaza. That is one of the oldest. And to be honest with you, we have set that up as the default region when you first log into OpenSim, unless you direct yourself somewhere else. Yeah. And originally, we had new people coming into the Welcome Center, and they really got a little confused there because it didn't look, it's like we have instructions of what to do, but there wasn't anybody there that they could talk to. Whereas Libsa Plaza, there's always someone sitting around there. We have what are known as greeters. Yeah. And so the idea is you can come here, talk to people, and they can better explain to you, even if they have to use a translator, of where to go and what to do. And then we have our portals at Libsa to go to the Welcome Center for new people. That's not open to someone, I think, who's been in the world there for about 30 days or so. I think they base it on age or something. Yeah. And the reason we don't want a lot of, older people wandering around in the Welcome Center, this is really for people to learn. And then they can come back to Libsa and ask questions and that sort of thing. And it seems to have worked better overall. And so we do make changes as we go along. We take people's suggestions, and in fact,
the real thing I was getting at in terms of budgeting and like knowing how much you need is to the extent to which you must be aware that when it comes to overheads, a few years go by, and to stay functional, as it were, you need better servers and stuff like that. So, you're having to budget for, obviously better servers cost money, newer servers cost money, although possibly they they work out more economical once you've got them, kind of thing. I know the Great Canada Grid, for example, has recently, they were offline doing some backups and stuff, and they're moving, they're putting their grandfather prices up, but in return, they are going to be on smashing new servers and more prims and stuff. And when you are issuing appeals for donations and things, is how much, do you think in terms of what you need at a given point in time, or do you think in terms of how much you need to have coming in hopefully, of course,
it's really
on a regular basis to cope with changing times,
Well, when we first started this campaign, we said, okay, what we want to do is maintain a balance of $3,000 in PayPal. That's what we've basically always done.
Right.
But then we, as we got along, and we got this $1,000 contribution, we rethought that. All right, should we say now we need 2,000? We said, no, let's stick with the same 3,000 because that'll give us some excess funds we can put into the bank. And we need to get our bank balance up. And once that bank balance up, that gives us a safety net. And that's what we're trying to do and we're not going to, and our monthly pledges, meaning people that pay each month, had gone down last year. That's what really got us in trouble. Because, and it happens like every month. It turned out we were running about $100 short per month. And what that does is it gradually brings down your balance at PayPal. And we don't have what we had before. This year, we've got it down to about $60 per month. However, I think that's now almost wiped out. So we're improving that. Now, if we can build up our funds and keep it that same rate, then we should be sailing fine. And so we're not going for some big, huge purchase. We're doing these things one step at a time. That's the best and safest way to do it. And you also have to take in mind the people's data, their experience on OS Grid. We don't want to do things that will upset. Believe me,
that's
very easy to have a community with torches.
that's actually why I was thinking of the long-term, short-term thing, because the last thing you need is to encounter something like that disaster that lasted for months. When
the long-term plan is
when you don't have the funds,
continue doing everything slowly, a little at a time, see what works, see what doesn't work. Because again, we're an experimental, grid, and there's some things that work here that don't work elsewhere. There's some things that work elsewhere that don't work here. And that's one of the problems we're running with our website right now. We're having to rewrite the website to work with OpenSim better. Because the old website was scripts written for the old OpenSim. And we're going through a period, of change now, but we've almost got it completely accomplished. And so the website should be much more useful to people. We're keeping parts of it that's always been there, the forums and the wiki. We're adding information. We've got new tutorials to it. We're going to have links to YouTube for having tutorials there that are more. The problem is the tutorials all over YouTube.
Oh God!
And no one knows where to go to get the latest of what really how to get this done. There've been ones made all the time, starting with OpenSim. But if you start with some of those, that's the old OpenSim. Things have changed since then, and so we're trying to set that up, and it's a time-consuming program. And we've had tutorials in World also. FaxBoat had been doing those for us. And we had some scripting classes being done recently. We've had all of these going on during the past year. And I think it's helped out users. Users from other grids could come in and participate too.
I think one of the useful places to be, is if you embed tutorials and things like that on things, probably principally Google Plus, where obviously you have a group as well, because you know, people can repost it in their own name and get them around. And I actually maintain feeds of machinima and stuff, but they don't include tutorials because it's more televisual, you know, without interfaces. But you know, but I sort of keep the links. But you know, if I come across something that's like tutorial based that I think is particularly worthy of watching, I will normally send the embed code to Google Plus. And you know, that way, you know, I say Google Plus because of all the social networks, that one seems to be the most popular amongst OpenSim users. Obviously some use Facebook as well, or whatever, but I certainly, even as a user in Google Plus, come across a lot of quite interesting OpenSim tutorials. And when I search through that, I tend to know that I'm going to see the latest as a rule, as opposed to a tutorial that's so old I might as well not watch it, you know. You know, so it's really a matter of getting the latest ones in view, you know, out there, so people realize it's a new tutorial, not an old one.
Well, and you know, yeah, I agree with you. We also have Facebook presence. And I can assure you, we've had no hackers from Russia on our site there, at least that we know of.
It's sometimes one of the beauties of being a tiny, small corner of the internet is that these huge monolithic corporations.
I don't want to use the word ignored, but it's sometimes best.
Well, we're not going to spend billions of dollars trying to hack that little virtual world.
And I'll be honest with you, we've had some people try to mess with our website, but fortunately we've had people who've caught them before they've done that, and they persisted and kept them out. We had to clean up somebody got into one of our forums and posted a bunch of junk in there. Took us a good while to clean that up, but we finally did it. And it's only because we got volunteers who care about it and they want it to, you know, be there to help people.
And you know, we get, you know, we've got to a stage where there's, I think, what I call a lot of unnecessary drama going in the blogs related to OpenSim and stuff like that. And you know, I think when you're dealing with not open source software, but as you say, you know, you're a free service and you're encouraging, you know, openness and everything else. You know, sometimes it is just, it gets to the point where inevitably, because they will come and try and mess you up, you know.
Oh, yeah.
You know, in the beginning, everything is cool. Everybody's on the same page. It's very pioneering spirit. But suddenly, you know, well, I can, you know, there's enough people there to mess up, or there's enough people reading this for me to blabber on, you know, about nothing, you know, or spam them, you know.
Well, I think
it's an inevitable thing of what we're doing, working in an open environment, really.
Well, all grids, I think, have to set certain policies and standards, and because there's only so far you can go in bending to help someone if they don't want to be helped. So we say, okay, thank you, try to be polite and let them go on their way.
Are you, or is OS Grid, you obviously know about the OpenSim Community Conference coming up.
Oh, yes.
Are you planning anything there? Obviously, it's a bit crossover. I mean, Nebadon, for example, runs that grid. And
well, Nebadon is our chief operating officer, still of OS Grid. And he basically oversees what we're doing there all the time, keeps us connected to the developers. That's been his service all along. And to be honest with you, just before the birthday, he showed up at one of our Saturday Q&As and really gave us an interesting history of OpenSim over the years and the various developers verbally, and gave us all kinds of links. We were hoping we would be able to have some kind of a display to utilize all this, but I don't think it ever got accomplished. But at least we still have the information that we can go back to. It's something I think is going to take much more time to put together. And I know he will be working on the conference. And I was wondering when the dates were myself, so I'm glad to hear. They've said around December.
Both I and James are actually privileged to be in the organising committee, if that's privileged is the word. So we've seen Everton there and stuff. 9th and 10th are going to be a dates, and we've already got the proposals call and everything else like that gone out. So everybody we talk to at the moment is like, are you going to do anything at OSCC?
Oh, and by the way, just to mention to you, just for this fundraiser right now, it's going to be held in 3 locations. Well, actually 2 locations. Event Plaza, where they have regular parties on Friday and Saturday. And then it will also be at the Maritime Grid.
That's Stefan's.
Yes, and he's going to be doing that on Sunday on his own sim. But he'll have links there if anybody wants to go try the carnival things on Event Plaza at the same time. And they can make pledges at his place or on ours, but we'll see how that goes. But just to mention, they're actually building this carnival theme on a special region right now.
Right.
And that will be put into an OR file, and then it will completely replace our current Event Plaza. That's one of the things that makes it easier to do things. So we don't have to change the current one. And then once it's over, the old one will be reestablished as an OR file.
Very good. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So, just mentioning the extra use of servers, that's one of the things we're doing now.
Yeah. Sounds like that OAL file will be a very useful thing to have around anyway. If it's going to be as good as it sounds. And presumably you have, these are the event-driven focuses of the fundraising, but presumably you will have booths and things you can give out to people to put on any region, and also maybe even the places on the hypergrid that aren't tied to another provider or something, you'd be quite happy to put them out too.
Well, I'll tell you what, one of the things we discussed doing this year was offering premiums for people's pledges. However, we really didn't get the information out enough, I think, to the creators. So we're just going to do the pledge thing this year, and then we may expand it next year so that, when somebody gives a certain level, they can get a certain item also. In real world, when you do that with the IRS requires you to deduct the value of that item from donation. Now, I think in the virtual world, the value will be so little, I don't think the IRS wants to bother with it. So, I think in that area.
It's very odd. The way value is assigned to things too. For example, if you do, I'll just give a hypothetical. I'm not suggesting this, but somebody who donates above a certain amount gets a kind of a gold certificate. I don't mean gold. I mean, just a piece of paper certificating, and that certificate in itself is rare. Now, the laws of rarity should mean that is of great value. But of course, when it comes to tax or something, a mere certificate, thank you for donating, has no value.
Well, I got another point of view. If you try to explain that to an IRS agent, it will come up in their brain, this does not compute. They're only now just getting around the bitcoins.
It's they have an uphill battle for. They tend to, it's bureaucrats, isn't it? They tend to be stuck in their rut that they started in at the beginning of their careers, and they're not very good at keeping up with what effectively are big revolutions
and technically on Second Life, they got into that whole controversy about games of chance. The reason there was a problem with that with OpenSim is you were dealing with monetary transactions. If you really just get to a game of chance that you get a virtual, object of not real value, something, the IRS could care less about it. So, and a lot of people take that judgment as absolute a rule, but no, you really have to use common sense on a lot of that.
I've never been comfortable with attempts by governments of various sorts to
get involved in the. We don't support funds on OS Grid, though.
Yeah.
So at all.
But presumably somebody on your grid.
Oh yes, individual sims can do that. Yeah.
Yes, so they can say donate to this sim via PayPal and put a PayPal box, on a prim. But obviously, I'm in the UK, for example. A lot of the people in English language I'm dealing with are in the States, of course. But there would be absolutely nothing to stop that gaming thing happening over here. So, if I'm hypergrid over to a gambling grid, if it's on an English server, technically, it doesn't matter what part of the world I come from, it's perfectly legal on that grid. And when you're talking about, if the gambling money is actually only virtual currency of some sort, it really is sort of inconsequential. I would have, my take on this is that, it's like any other internal operation in a way. I mean, if you draw, let's say Second Life, because it is a commercial and it's agreed with an economy. If you draw, say, £500 of profit, $500 of profits, right, from Second Life, because you're accumulating a load and you think, oh, I'll have some of that as income, then I think that $500 is what should be declared on your income tax form for the IRS or whoever. I don't think any of the individual micro transactions that happen whilst that money is still invested on the platform is, I don't really think it's worth them bothering with that kind of fact. I think, the gambling thing is a bit different because it's not laws pertaining to money, it's laws pertaining to gambling, really, isn't it? They don't want people gambling.
I think the IRS is interested more in the money being stored in the Cayman Islands or something like that.
Yeah. Well, exactly. I mean, I remember reading a while ago, and I'm not going to mention anything because it could get you into deep water, but somebody was saying, professing to know where the Linden dollar currency was held, because it's like a reserve account that has to be held independently of Linden Labs' own accounts, because it has to be there to be drawn by people who own, have that currency, if you see what I mean. And there's these suggestions that Linden Labs had a secret account in here, there, and everywhere, which was where they kept the float, as it were, for the Linden dollar, and they didn't have enough Linden dollars to back up the real world dollar value, and you get into all sorts of messes with that. I'm sorry, I'm not saying that any of this is the case with Linden Labs, but I'm saying it was an example.
But they're bringing up the Linden Labs and their an economy there. We do have a couple of volunteers on Second Life that have been accepting contributions there in Lindens, and then they translate those into dollars and they donate them to us. So we have been getting, some funding in a roundabout way from some supporters from Second Life.
Have you considered, now I know you're not a commercial grid, and we all know that, you're, as you say, you're a community grid on the one hand, and you're also the developers grid on the other hand, and you're constantly balancing that, obviously. And you don't have a currency. Now, I must say that doesn't bother me because I got a bit of currency in the Great Canadian Avatar, but that's Podex. And, if I go to DigiWorlds, which is also Podex, it doesn't transfer. It's just really a nuisance. So I like the fact that there isn't too much currency on OpenSim. But there are new things like Globits, of course, which I almost think like a sort of PayPal for, well, it's not just virtual worlds and games. It could be anything. Have you considered the possibility that something like Globits or something should be available to people on OS Grid? Not so much, and I have to qualify that by saying not so much as having a grid currency, but having, let's say an avatar visited, right? And I had a Globits wallet, right, with a virtual currency in it. And I saw a donation tin in OS Grid, and I wanted to just drop some of my glow bits straight into the nation can, like you tip a performer. Have you ever considered that it would be an idea to consider that as a facility rather than an economy of its own?
Well, first off, we really consider that as a complicated process, especially since we're a nonprofit. Yeah. And because we don't want to do anything that could possibly jeopardize our status with the IRS. And since anyone who runs their own sim can have their own economy, we prefer it to be that way. That puts a responsibility on those individual sim owners as to how they handle what they charge, how it's, handled.
Sure.
We're not stopping them. And I should mention that it only applies to the plazas that OS Grid runs itself, that there is no economy. You can go, for instance, over to Snoopy's. That's a grid run from Switzerland. And they provide servers, hosting, by the way, also. As soon as you land on that grid, you'll notice up there you got $100,000 or whatever it is.
That's always confused me. At one point, I used to log into OS Grid, and I had so much OS currency. I said, I don't know where that came from.
Right. Well, that's the one place I know that always does that, and that's just basically play money.
Yeah.
And we could do that, but that would really confuse people from Second Life. They were thinking, and so we decided, no, let's not get into that.
And if it was play money, they couldn't use it.
And if you actually go to Snoopy's website, they provide, I believe they're the ones that developed, or they at least expanded the PayPal module that can be connected to your sim, so that you can have your own way of receiving payments or so forth through PayPal. Yeah. So what I'm saying is there are other sims on OS Grid. It's not that those sims don't have an economy. They can. Most people choose not to do that. And the reason we don't want the economy is we want to promote free and open sharing of inventory and parts and stuff. Yeah. And we follow the DMCA religiously. If someone reports that someone has put something here that shouldn't be here, it's mine, I created, and did not give them, we remove it.
Yeah.
And
I asked about it more as a facility thing rather than the idea that OS Grid will ever have an economy. But the other thing that you may be able to answer this, that always puzzles me, and oddly, the OSCC grid is equally the brain here. I think apart from the OSCC grid, maybe this is one of Nebeden's things, I don't know. OS Grid is the only grid that I ever sort of frequently visit that doesn't support the suitcase. This has always kind of confused me, because obviously if I pick up a freebie, it goes straight to my local inventory and I hope it comes back. But I've always wondered in the logic of it not doing so. One of the main reasons is it's not compatible with our inventory system. And it would cause more problems than it was worth it. And there are problems that could be fixed, but that's something that Diva will have to work on eventually, and we'll have to make some changes. And you really do not have to have the inventory, the suitcase, in order to hypergrid and pick up items everywhere else. The only difference is you'll carry your whole inventory with you. Yeah, well, and I've got a big inventory, and actually it's supposed to be roundabouts, because I will arrive one place, and everything in my suitcase is available, but my regular inventory isn't, because it's like it's in a shipping container. It will follow me days later. Whereas,
well, let me give you a warning about that, because they've said the problem in doing that is you subject everything in your inventory to being transferred to this new grid. Yeah, because that new grid will have a copy of your inventory from the other. So what we recommend is that you use an alt that has very little inventory, if you're going to hypergrid from OS Grid to one of the others. It's the recommendation. It's the workaround. We wish, things would be better, but we're sort of stuck with, we're working with a lot of old data that's stored here, and it's just will not work properly with the suitcase. And until that's corrected at some point, then either our data is corrected or, the suitcase software is corrected to work better with it. We're sort of stuck with, that circumstance.
Yeah, and it's it's just so funny because most of most of the OpenSim grids and regions do tend to support the suitcase, and I guess it's all down to Diva and the Is Diva on your board or whatever? By the way, is she amongst the? You said you had the. There's a dozen of you on the on management. Is she on that, or is she just like consultant developer?
Who's that again now?
Diva.
Oh yeah,
Krista.
Yeah, she's a diva. I mean, she's a diva and a developer.
Right. Yeah, I know. I know. I was just curious to know whether she was actually on the OSGrid board, so to speak. Right.
No, she's not on. She's not on our board. I should mention that they did form a organization at one point for the developers themselves. But they got in some trouble with the Internal Revenue Service and not the IRS.
About this, yeah.
Well, not the IRS, but actually it was with California.
Okay.
James.
Some papers had not been filed, and at the same time, I think some of the other board members had dropped off, so they decided just to go ahead and dissolve that for the time being. And actually, I was going to try to help them to get their IRS status, but then the board itself made that decision, to go that way. And I think they prefer to operate it like that for right now. I mean, they dissolved the organization in California, but I think it's still operating as a sort of an organization, I would say internationally at this point.
What organization?
Well, there was a foundation they set up.
Okay, right.
Was that Abbott?
Yeah, I forgot the first name of it because it's been like 2-3 years now.
Yeah, it was Abbott, I think it was called, but it sort of went. Apparently it went before Justin left.
And I think the original reason for that is they were going to try to find some funding sources for that. And I was all for helping them. I really do think if they ever get around to wanting to, reform that, I can help them do that. The biggest problem is getting these big corporations really interested in donating money, and really just a little bit of money to a developer who has to support himself would help.
Well, it's very interesting because we've got into the discussions about this before, especially when Maria Kowaloff was with us, but also, the IMA recently and stuff like that. It always seems that the what we tend to be calling the OpenSim core developers seem to have always been very reluctant to. It's not so much be paid as just take money. It's like a caution about the implications of it, even if it's trust or something like this. And I think I was hearing the other week that the reason the Albertlr Foundation really disappeared was because nobody really wanted to take on the bureaucratic side of it, the formal side of it.
Yeah, and as I said,
developers are much happier just getting on with their thing and working together as best they can as a team.
I think it's still there. It's just, it's been closed in California, as was OSGrid, only because, they were having, and by the way, I was going to mention to you that one of the problems with California is even if you make no income, if you're registered in California, you have to pay $800 a year.
Oh, well, so taxes on nothing.
I don't know why they do that, but a lot of corporations have moved out of the state because of that.
I bet they have. If they can't take a loss one year and they still have to pay it.
Yeah,
And
they don't care if you got a loss or not. You got to at least pay $800.
Oh, that's it makes me realize, here of course Britain is a one state, so I mean the rules apply everywhere, but the variation in America is really rather odd.
I should correct that this is what it was several years ago. I have not checked since. I have not had anything else to do with California since we formed the new organization. But we're even considering at one point moving our corporation maybe to another state, maybe even Nevada. And the problem is Texas requires 2 of the board members to be residents in Texas. And we really want to be able to have representation from everywhere and not be stuck with just Texas, whereas in Nevada you can be anywhere. And that's why a lot of them have moved from California to Nevada, both for the amount they charge there and the flexibility.
Interesting. James, I've got a feeling if there are any live viewers today, they are probably multitasking at Abbott Art Fest. But have you got any questions, or indeed there have been any questions coming in?
Well, yeah, there haven't been any questions on the chat on YouTube, but I did have a question myself, and it was addressed a little bit, but I was trying to phrase this question, the relationship between OS Grid and the OpenSim developers, and I think we touched on that a little bit. So I would like to ask, what kind of relationships do you see between the grids? And when I attend the developer meetings, I get the strong sense that when users would like to have a new feature in Open Simulator, they can of course go right to the Mantis and ask for it, but it's probably better to go through your grid and say, I'd like this feature on our grid. Grid owner, can you go to the developers and see about getting this implemented? And so I'm just curious what OS Grid, what you see as like an association of grid owners, or that's the question.
Well, I think that would be a nice idea. The problem is getting it, I guess, organized. The conference is really one of the best areas now of getting the various grids together working on common projects, and maybe that would be a good topic of discussion to happen there.
Yeah, and I think that goes into there are kind of three aspects to the whole thing, and the one is the OpenSim code, the grids and grid owners, and then of course the viewers. And the viewers is kind of one of the most difficult things to get a handle on.
And I'd say, the purpose of OS Grid is we're testing changes, bugs, fixes, improvements, and we're giving feedback, our users are, to the developers. What's working, what's not working. Mm-hmm. They're always, requesting things, but I can't say we have any louder voice here than does anyone else in the grid. Mm-hmm. And so what I'm saying is, it'd be nice to really have a more organized body that could represent those questions and suggestions to the developers. But again, I think, the conference would be a good area to try to organize something like that.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Well, we've reported a lot on the IMA, the Infinite Metaverse Alliance, but again, we're finding that's a very difficult communication process.
And by the way, anyone that wishes to communicate with the developers, they can always go onto the IRC channel.
Yep.
It's listed on our website. That's what it's for, to talk to developers about these things.
That's true. I have an IRC widgets open on my desktop, and I really rarely use it. But I do see the OS Grid and the and dev channel. But there's very little chatter there. It surprises me because I will probably see the chatter and respond if it was interesting. But I find there's very little.
It's like going to a sim or a region in Second Life. And is anyone here? Is anyone here?
Yes,
Hello,
exactly.
anyone around? So,
Yeah, but I do see people logging in and logging out. Oh, somebody's in the room, somebody's left the room, and whatever. And I'm never quite sure whether I'm in the room or not. It's just in my tray. It's meant to be permanently logged in, but yeah, so many channels. But of course, IRC goes back a long way, and for people who've been around a long while, it's it's their preferred method.
And by the way, just to let people know how to connect to it, if you go to our webpage, at the very top, you click info, and then down the list is chat. You click on that, tells you how to connect to the IRC channels.
Oh yeah, you can do it. You can do it live from the webpage, I guess.
Yep.
I actually have a desktop client, but it's easier on the web, I guess, for some people who just want to check in. Yeah. Very good. And talking about Escrid, I've just realised that we will be on there for a little bit longer. But if you want to see what's happening on Escrid, where's it gone? Live music at Maritime Belfast Club starts at 10 o'clock. That's 30 minutes time. So that, of course, is that's Stefan. Is it McThomas or something?
That's correct.
That's his kind of region, and that seems to be one of the more popular regions over there. Although that's an independent region, of course, isn't it? But it's from
and DJ Aussie is handling all the other. There's so many DJs that are going to be participating on the 29th and the 30th. That I really can't list them all, but in fact, we will have those listed on our website and the times. But those will be at Event Plaza.
Right. Yeah, basically, every area that's called something Plaza on OS Grid is actually owned and run by OS Grid, and everything. Almost everything else is independent. I did have a technical question. I'll get in before we start getting more general and rounding up. Obviously, OS Grid, being the developer's grid, in inverted commas, you're running not only the latest 0.9 series of OpenSim, but you're probably running a 0.9 point blah blah, however many updates to be from the developers. When you've got other regions that are independent regions on your grid, which in a sense are mini grids themselves in some cases, in most cases probably, do they have to be running the same version of the server software that OS Grid officially runs, or can regions be quite happily running an 08 series installation?
Well, it really depends. A lot of cases, they don't update to the latest version. And and sometimes that will cause problems because it doesn't communicate with the latest robust version.
Right.
In which case they will have to upgrade. We usually put at least 2 upgrades a month on our website for users to upgrade their sites, but a lot of them don't do that. I've run 6 months behind myself sometimes. So
yeah,
it really depends.
It's easy to do, if things are working fine and you've got no problems, you think, why, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
I've downloaded upgrade. It couldn't get the darn thing started. And so I just revert back to the other one I had, and I'm back in business. And I always keep copies of your old one. You'll learn to do that.
Now, the other thing which is related to this, and I think I know the answer already, but there are, we can't ignore the fact that there are, how should I say, different strands of OpenSim, or even with other names that have appeared over the years. I mean, you've got something like Halcyon, which can't support the hypergrid, and it's derived from the same roots, but it's a different beast. But you've got other things like ArebaSim. And I really should stop mentioning that because Freaky Tech will probably point out some flaw in my sentence. But which, are totally compatible with the hypergrid and everything else. Now, what would happen if you had a region or sort of a grid within your grid that suddenly popped up and started, like, a few hypergrid destinations, are choosing to run a Reba, either to test it or, just because they like it. And yet that again is, that's an even further apart than, say, an 08 version of OpenSyn Core. Would there be real problems if somebody did that on your grid? If they had a region in OS Grid that was actually running something fundamentally more like a kind of rewrite of the code, would that be compatible or just be a write-off from the start?
There's been a lot of changes made to the database and that type of thing. So I think they can try to load it. If it'll load and it's, without any errors, then they're welcome to do that.
Right. Okay. I suspect I'm well out of my depth asking that question. It's a sort of curiosity that pops to my mind.
I think if you had an older version, it just wouldn't load.
Yeah. Fair enough. So, let's talk about coming events and stuff like that. Now, obviously, the donation fundraising drive is the main thing here. Is there, you mentioned the events that will be happening and everything else. Is this particular drive like up until, I don't know, say the end of December or something, or is it something you'll be promoting as? Obviously, you always want donations. There's no getting out of that, but. Is this like how should I say? Is this campaign, this fundraising campaign, is it for a fixed time? Are you trying to get to your targets within a fixed period and then just continue getting money flowing in? In other words, the coming events and stuff like that, which is to do with fundraising, is the period of the event scheduled pretty integral to the whole effort?
Yeah, well, like in public radio, we're putting a limit on the time we're going to nag people.
Right.
If you want to call it that. It's really, we call it pitching, but
yeah.
So we'll probably just be going through Sunday itself. I do understand that some may also continue a few things during the following week at their own regions, just like Style will be doing also on Sunday.
Sure. Yeah, but basically it is just like one big week for, pitching.
Yeah, we want to have a limited time in doing that.
All right. Okay, well, I hope it all turns out well and raises a goodly amount of funds. Anything else on OS Grid per se? I mean, I realize that when we're talking about OS Grid, from your point of view, it's a limited number of regions, but other activities that are of interest to listeners?
Well, this is the main thing, except that we do have the Friday parties every Friday about the same time on Event Plaza. And we do list these on Libsa Plaza. If you go there, you'll see all the current events listed. Also, it'll be on our website. So we try to keep things up to date, but there's nothing else really planned beyond this at this point.
Right. So the website is. You better give out the website, the full address. I don't mean.
By the way, it is a secure website.
Sure. Oh, very good.
It's HTTPS.
Yeah.
www.osgrid.org.
Right.
Yeah, I've been browsing around it during the show, and it's fantastic. I mean, I haven't been there for a little while, and the website's looking great.
Oh,
yeah,
very good.
Very nice.
I mean, I got to say, it's obviously I do all the news and click through websites over on the iPad, but when I'm in here and on the desktop, I tend to ignore the web, except for the hypergrid jumps.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
I just thought
we have to give credit to Paela, Paela, one of our volunteers from France, has been working on the site continually now for about 6 months.
Oh, wonderful.
That's very nice. Great information.
Yeah.
And the wiki's looking great too.
All the modern bells and whistles, no doubt.
Yep.
Unlike any of my
Yep.
websites. I think the last time I touched one, my
true.
actual touched one of my actual websites was about 10 years ago. I think, it just doesn't seem important when I've got a 3D space.
And I've been hosting the Saturday Q&As for the past year and a half. Sometimes others fill in, but we found it was a good way to have better communication with everybody about what's going on. And
yeah, and is that 11 Pacific time?
yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Every Saturday at 11 at Wright Plaza, second floor.
Cool. Very nice.
And of course, while we're at it, James, you can give out the info. We always plug this over on the news anyway, but of course, OS Grid is host to the developers meets, the Tuesday ones, isn't it?
Right on Tuesdays. Yep. And I believe that's also 11.
And that which plaza is that on?
That's on Wright. Typically, it's been on Wright Plaza.
Wright Plaza.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So yes, another thing that you'll find on OS Grid.
On OS Grid,
and,
absolutely.
And and as we sort of mentioned, I mean, OS Grid is one of the oldest grids in OpenSim. In fact, it probably, there's lovely anecdotes at the beginning about Linden's involvement. Basically, OS Grid has been there before there was a hypergrid to jump in with. It really was, came with OpenSim before the hypergrid almost. Not all regions are online all the time because, as was explained, some of them are self-hosted and they. If the individual servers, the independent servers are down, then they I think they usually still show up on the map for a while, but they may not be there. But there are, it's one of the oldest and largest. If you want a grid where there are a billion destinations available, it's a pretty good grid to go browsing. And as we were told, the ethos is there is sharing. So if you want to look for freebies and things, it's a good place. And presumably, in fact, you may be able to tell us about this. I mean. There are regions on the hypergrid which are like sandboxes where you can put, but not so much free sandboxes, but you can actually put things down that you want to contribute. For example, if you go to OS Grid and pick up a free house, but you've got another house as well that only you have got, you may want to put it down to give away to other people because of this sort of the sharing economy at work there. Would you say that's the case?
Oh yeah, well, we have plazas that have free homesteads on it also. Other than that, you've got other people who run sims who gladly accept homesteads, and they don't charge anything. Some may charge, very few do. So it's free for all there.
Yeah.
Build what you want to build. And we have sandboxes available, I think 2 or 3 now. And one of them features the UBODE physics engine.
Oh, right.
Which is a newer one, and it's very close to Second Life. And so I'm pretty much a script that worked there should work here. Almost everything. I will say one thing, though. The developer's a lot more strict on proper code writing. So if a code is not properly written, it will come up with an error. But once those are corrected, it can work. And overall, though, on most of the plazas, we still use the bullet sim. And that's still being worked on by Robert, the representative from Intel that has been doing that for years now. And he's perfecting it, always fixing it.
Yeah, I've anecdotally here, I've been tempted to the Outworlds installer has still got it still advertises the 09 version as dev rather release, but there will be a release one, and I was at least I will probably gamble on the change because I know I can actually change to '09 and keep bullet physics. I was for a long while rather worried that I would have to change to the U-boat because I've got so much mesh that ain't proper mesh. I've got a feeling I'll be in trouble if I go too proper. But that's a thing. I've just remembered something I was going to do on this show, and I'm going to do it now. So before we close. James and my mind's gone blank.
Albert?
Albert, yeah.
Yes.
I apologise for that. Absolutely. This is what comes of being on air for too long. I've been this grid we're actually broadcasting from. It's a private grid, so although you can hypergrid in, we're never going to be hosting any public events, so it's just for shows. But I've been building quite a lot in here, and I put together a set of photos. Just I thought for once I'm going to use the show to show off my own excuse for building. So I'm gonna click this slideshow on the right. I don't know whether James has a camera in that direction. The first shot is my new mesh avatar, which you will be seeing in all its glory before long. At the moment, it's wearing a pair of glasses and a hat to disguise the fact that my face looks a bit awry. But continuing along, and guys, do feel free to comment. Tell me how wonderful these look, or not. This is the landing region. It's changed a bit since this shot was taken. This is the only area in the 25 5x5 VAR that wasn't OAR. It was one. I don't know. It was an Linda Kelly or what side. It was a late side thing, and I've changed it a bit by replacing all the terrain with mesh landforms, but it's following the shape that was originally there. This is one of the coastal regions up north with a dinky old lighthouse, and there's actually a house above that beach now, so that's passed its way. But most of the stuff I'm working on are these lovely, it seems like I'm burying everything in the whole 25 regions under trees, so it's like an eternal forest for a great part. So these are a couple of foresty scenes. There's an oldie castle that I picked up from somewhere, probably on OS Grid, who knows, which is buried in one of the forest parts. This is one I particularly like. I'm just calling it Going Japanesey, just rocks, and it's in the Highlands up north. This is, those of you who come to Metaworld Broadcasting on the Great Canadian Grid will know that Metaworld Spaces has a grand lawn. And I cannot avoid having a grand lawn. And if you know Metaworld Spaces, you'll know the houses too.
Same houses, yeah.
Same, yeah, good old British, townhouses. They fit.
The advantage in World is you don't have weeds popping up in your lawn.
Yeah, I've got to admit, I've got heavy old foliage here.
Nor do you have to cut it.
No, but
according to the homeowners association, every week.
Yeah, well, yes, exactly. I'm trying to look for an NPC who's got a lawnmower, so I can program him to just go up and down constantly mowing the lawn. I've got a sweeper up in the studio, but he's just got a broom. Yeah, I love the flowers and stuff, although I've got to admit I've never really been happy with that slightly 2D effect of foliage and OpenSim or Second Life. You move around it and it makes for good photographs, but it doesn't necessarily work when you're trying to walk through them. More rough landscapey sort of stuff here. As you can see, it's all very greenish and stuff, but almost every shot that goes any distance has got huge mountains in the background. This is the more sort of swamp, marshy region, and that river leads from up top there, sort of coming forward. It eventually hits the ocean. As it's
I've had some trouble coming down that canal in the boat.
Oh yes, there are slight problems here with the boats at the moment. So I think it might be to do with, I think it's to do with the bounding box of meshes under the water, maybe obstructing the boats. But I'm seeking further advice on this. It's not my forte.
Well, I still have vivid memories of doing that.
A group of my favorite trees again. This actually is my home spot. In other words, whenever I hit the bottom my home button in my viewer, this is the place I land. It's in the lowlands, immediately before the highlands, sort of thing. And it's got a gazebo stuck there. Boring, really. That's another long shot. Various ruin stuff in the highlands. The mountains in the background are all actually off the region. They're just enclosing everything. It is a very magical looking one. This is deep in the forest. This is where the fantasy people hang out, presumably. Nice little grotto on the left and a mushroom house. I like that. There are a lot of mushroom houses to be picked up on OpenSim. I particularly like that one. There's something about the roof of that one that has got something going for it.
A couple of comments very nice in the YouTube chat, Mel.
Oh, very good.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I got a little chance to show them off. I'm actually
I think they're
posting.
nice too. Very good.
I'm actually posting one pic a day to Flickr under my Burns_Mal is my Flickr account name. So I'm sending one shot to Flickr, but these are just ones I took offline. And this is sort of wooden cabins, alpine, pine trees, and then I'm going to soften this from a hard mountain to a bit of a rise, but it's getting very close to the edge of the sim, but it's sort of alpine look. And hidden at the top of that huge rise, there's a whole winter region, which you can't really see from below. I don't want you to. I don't want you to. You have to find the mountain trail, and believe me, the mountain trail is actually nowhere near the mountain. Ha ha. This is right up far north, nothing much there yet, but behind the rocks, as you're looking inland, there's going to be art galleries. Just my private little art galleries. You can hypergrid in here, by the way, but you'll probably be refused if there's more than 5 people. It's definitely not. All our show guests can get in here, etc., and you can get in and wander around on your own. But no touring parties,
I was
please.
going to say, when can the Safari come and crash the grid?
No,
Crash the region.
I think was it the other week? I had Thursday on the show and we were talking about it. I said, well, one region is never going to have Safari is mine. Guarantee it's on my desktop. Come on, it's going to crash, isn't it? Another little sort of Japanesey sort of area. Another view of the.
By the way, with one of the changes they made to Event Plaza, we've had close to 100 avatars there before it crashed.
I heard that. Yeah.
Yeah. Safari is amazing. Some obligatory old ruins. Actually, they're quite important because you get to the top of the hill and you're sort of diverted into a little tower, and it leads onto this walkway, which then leads you all around, all over the place to a different place. But it's the only route in and out. So if you miss the start of this walkway, you're scuppered. I love this house. I don't know where I got it, but it's just got that lovely. I don't think it's actually mesh, but it's got that lovely sort of, I don't know, low sort of real quality to it. That's actually right at the edge of where the river to the marshy bit starts. This is various old ruins. The tower there you can actually get into. I often think I'm doing storytelling here or something like the old hunts that I did on the Great Calendar Grid, and of course I'm never going to do those here because I don't want crowds coming in. But I often think I'm building the same stories. This is actually the very southern tip of the whole 25 regions, as it were, and the rows of rocks on the left are actually simply a boundary to stop you going off the simulator completely. And then another view of the beginning of the river and marsh there. And I like this one too. I didn't think I was going to, but I plonked it down and I had some nice sort of normal looking grass, and I thought that little house suited that place. That's sort of on the edge of the forests in the middle. And this is kind of what I call a little residential bit, of course. Or every residence is my residence, of course, at the moment. But it's on the edge of that grand lawn, and the pathway there leads right down to the south end of the sim, so it sort of changes a bit as you walk down it. And that is the Western Rocks. everything there is off sim except for the region on the left, which you can barely see, which is like a rocky sort of place to sit and pose and do stuff. And that's the avatar you're looking at right now. I don't know what he's doing in there. Not the mesh avatar. And there we go. So that was my little treat. I've never done that on this show before, but yes, why not show off a bit? So especially if people in the channel will say yay. Right, okay, so yeah, if you promise to come in on your own, you're welcome to Hypergrid Inn and explore. But believe me, 25 a 5x5 bar region, that's 25 normal regions, and you may be biting off more than you could chew. It does feel like a grid rather than a region. Anyway, aside from that, that's just my little bit for the week. So before I close the show, I always go around everybody saying, is there anything else we haven't discussed unrelated to what we discussed, kind of thing they'd like to get in? It may not necessarily be anything to do with events coming up or things going on in their lives, whatever they want to say, really. Just to get into a rhythm of it, I'll start with James.
Yeah, nothing.
Any other comments? Yeah.
No, just all the events coming up. It's a busy fall again, and so there's a lot to do, and I'm working with the OSCC conference as well. So very excited about that time coming up.
I have to say, I too am, and in fact, I'm a bit bored really, because I by stepping into the International Expo too, the weekend after. I mean, Tessa and I are just so keen to do it, but suddenly, and it's such a convenient time to do it, but of course the workload involved in two simultaneous, adjacent events. Yeah. Okay, and
I have nothing else except I'm just glad Maria bypassed us. The hurricane.
Oh! Do you know, for a dread minute there, I thought you were referring to a certain Maria who used to go host the show.
That's right. Me too, Mel. Grid statistics, was that what it was?
Yes. We if there are any statistics, they'll appear on the news this week rather than the conversation here. But no, that was.
Well, the OS grid,
and actually, Maria has asked us for statistics so many times that Dan finally fixed it so that it'd be put on the front page for her, so she doesn't have to nag us anymore.
Oh yeah, and the grid stats look really good on the site as well. The charts.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, she is always going on about stats, well, these grids, why are these grids not, some grids don't release their stats on the page because they don't want Maria to see them and imply something. Oh, it's silly, really. She says, but I can't find their stats. It's not on the front page. But I don't know, some people are a bit precious about statistics. I suppose they don't, if they're growing, they want to show the fact they're growing, and then if they're shrinking for some unfortunate reason, they don't want anybody to know. I guess that's life all over, really. Okay, well, I'm going to call it a wrap for this week. I think we covered everything. Thank you, James, of course, for being here and also running the cameras, so thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome, Mel. It's my pleasure.
And I'm glad to be here today.
Yes, indeed, Albert. I was. You're our special guest, so you get the extra thanks. Wonderful talk, and I certainly wish you all the best of luck with the fundraising, and the future of Earth's grid in general.
We're optimistic it will reach our goal.
Indeed, but very good to see you anyway, and great to talk. So. I'm going to call it a wrap. I'm going to wish you all a very good morning, a very good afternoon, a very good evening, and indeed a very good tomorrow, depending on wherever and whenever you are. And we're out of here for now. We'll see you same place, same time next week. Bye for now.
Bye.